trying to think what aisle you found it on.
My name's Chris Van Valkenburg, and we're here at Computer Savvy in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This video is for the purpose of recertifying myself for WordPerfect 5.1. I've been a certified instructor since 1987. I've been here with Computer Savvy since 1983. This particular portion that I'm going to be covering is for macro variables. It's going to be 20 minutes for purposes of this video. It normally would be just a part of our advanced WordPerfect course and would be preceded by a review of simple macros. My students here today are Ann and Marilyn, and I worked with Ann and Marilyn, so I know that both of them are quite familiar with WordPerfect in general and have, yes you are, and have worked with some simple macros. So the purpose of this is just to show variables themselves. The first thing that needs to be done is just what is a variable. So a variable is a place in the computer's memory where it stores a piece of information that it can get to repeatedly. Well, I want you to think of them kind of like a magician's hat. All right? So think of your computer. Here's just keyboard and the computer. And somewhere in memory, there are places allocated that you can put information into. And if you think of those like a magician's hat, sometimes you can pull a rabbit out of the hat, and sometimes you pull an apple out of the hat. You know, it just depends on what you put in there. That's what a variable is. A variable has two parts. Number one is the name of the variable. I mean, I would call this an animal variable. This is the animal hat. There's different animals that come out of this hat, but it's the animal hat. And I'll call this the fruit hat. So this hat is for different fruits. Different fruits come out of it. And well, you can use your imagination, you know? All right. I think the best part, oh, and the second part, I said there's two parts to a variable, right? One part is the name of the variable. The second part is the contents of the variable. Or WordPerfect calls that the value. And you have to know a couple of things about the variable names and the variable values. A variable name should be limited to 7 characters. You can type in a lot more than 7 characters, but WordPerfect is only going to read those first 7 characters. So you may as well just use the first 7 characters. Number 2, the contents. People always say, well, how much can be stored in a variable? And how much is not really limited, but the contents has to either be an integer, which is whole numbers. You can't put fractions in any of the magician's hat. Or a character string, a text string. So numbers or words. I think the best way to understand a variable, and we do this a lot at Computer Savvy, is kind of look at the end result. I'm going to have you look at a macro that's already been created using variables to show the concept of what is a variable. And then we're going to back out and I'm going to have you create one. On your screens right now should be the same thing as what I'm showing up here, and this is WordPerfect Office. This is where we start every class. All you have to do to get into WordPerfect is press W to get into WordPerfect. And I'm going to do it along with you. Okay. Then, the macro that I've already created is called boat. It's for the sale of a boat. And you're going to have, sometimes you're going to have different buyers and different sellers. So this is where we're using variables. First, I want you to run the macro without putting any contents into the variables. So Alt F10 to play a macro and boat, B-O-A-T. And you can see it says contract for sale of yacht. This agreement is entered into between blank and blank for the sale of blank's yacht located in Fort Lauderdale Yacht Basin. Blank has agreed to pay to blank and seller and buyer. So you get the idea of what we're using this for. And let's say you are a yacht broker. You have to create this kind of document all the time for different buyers and different sellers. Okay, clear your screen. F7NN. Now, you just have to trust me. That macro has set up two variables. One called, all right, what did I do with the marker? One called seller and one called buyer. But when you played the macro, you got nothing, right? The hats are empty. The variables are empty. They already have names, however, buyer and seller, but they're empty. So I want to show you how you put contents or give a value to a variable. You do that with the control page up command. And at the bottom of your screen, it will say variable. It says, well, which of these variables are you wanting to put some contents into? And type buyer. Then you should see the word value in the lower left-hand corner. And our buyer is, what do the notes say? Our buyer is Leona Helmsley. And press enter. All right. Now absolutely nothing has happened, right? Your screen is completely blank. You don't feel like you've done anything. But you have put contents into this variable that's in memory. All right, do the same thing for seller. Control page up. Variable is seller. And our seller is Donald Trump. All right. Once again, nothing has happened visually, but you have changed the contents of the buyer variable. Now run the macro again. Alt F10. Vote. And now we have an agreement entered into between Donald Trump and Leona Helmsley. Seller Donald Trump, buyer Leona Helmsley, at a couple different places. All right, clear your screen. And now I want to see you try that. You made another sale. This time you sold Ted Turner's boat to Jane Fonda. So let's check. You want to change the buyer to Jane Fonda, change the seller to Ted Turner.
Fonda. Fonda.
Okay. Now you've just changed the contents of the variables in memory. Now run your macro again. Okay, so now you have a contract entered into between Ted Turner and Jane Fonda. Seller Ted Turner, buyer Jane Fonda. So that is the power of variables. Any time that you have a situation that is a repetitive type situation, think of the variables and the kind of power that that can afford. This is a very, very simple example. Variables can be numeric and they can do all sorts of work in your macro. You might notice that this looks like something you would do with merge rather than a macro. That's perfectly fine. Variables are available in merging as well as in macros. All right? So let me ask here. What are the two parts to a variable?
Name and contents.
The contents. And what does WordPerfect call the contents?
Value.
value, right. And on the fly, I'm going to show you another way of putting the value into variables. But on the fly, what keystrokes do you do to tell it you want to change a variable's contents? Control page up. Right. Okay. Now, if you look at your notes, on the second page of your notes, item number 5, creating the variables in the macros. I had you use a macro that I had already done. So now you say, oh, well, I like that. How do I do it? Clear your screens. Okay. Did you fade out? I did my signal.
Oh, you did your signal?
I was working my camera. Now,
Okay. So now you're going to create just a very simple macro that will write out how many hotels somebody's going to buy and what the purchase price is that they're going to buy for this hotel. You've gotten out of the yacht brokerage business. Now you're selling hotels. All right? You know how when you press Control F10 to start a macro, it just turns the recorder on? All the work that you're going to do with variables has to be done in the macro editor itself. So rather than Control F10 and turn the recorder on and then finish it, and then Control F10 and E for edit, there's a quick way to go directly into the macro editor. Press Home first, then Control F10. Home, Control F10, and the macro that you're going to create here will be hotels. And enter. And a description is just type quantity and price, because that's the variables you're going to be creating here. And notice how it takes you directly into the macro editor. And we don't need the display off for this one, or it doesn't really matter, but for cleanliness of the screen, press delete to get that display off out of there. Okay. So, you want this to say, buyer is purchasing blank, which is the number of hotels, at blank price each. That's it. That's all it's going to be. So the variables that you need to create here are quantity and price. First type, buyer is purchasing. All right, and now you want to create a variable in here. You want to say, at this point, put the variable called quantity. And you can see in your notes, it's going to have a tilde and variable and a bracket. You can't type that bracket though. This is a special code. So press Control Page Up to get the list of all macro commands. See the little box open up in the upper right hand corner? Then there's a giant list. You can scroll down until you find variable, or you can just press V. And it jumps to the first command that starts with V. Then you say, I want that command. Press Enter. And it puts the word variable in there. Now you have to tell it what variable? Quantity.
And we're tapping the full word.
Yeah, the full word quantity. Now, can you tell from looking at the box that displays the command, it says variable, VAR, and a little tilde. That's giving you a little bit of instructions. It's saying, if you choose this, I'll put the command variable in there. You have to type the variable's name and then type the tilde. It only knows that you're done typing the variable's name when it hits that tilde. The tilde is extremely important. Okay, and then type the rest of the sentence. Hotels, comma, at, and here you want another variable called price. So how do you get up to the variable command? Control page up. And then it goes back to the same command that you were at last time. So all you have to do is press Enter. And then give the name of the variable. And then what? Tilde. Right.
And then each.
I'm behind, I'll do it up here. Control F10, hotel, and control page up. Now how do I get, so I did control page up and this box opens up. How do I quickly get down to the one I want?
The letter V.
Alright, I type V and it jumps right down to variable. I press enter. The variable I want here is quantity. Close. And a tilde for the price of control page up, variable, and price. Now, notice that it's scrolled off the edge here. Let me just point out something. It's scrolled off the edge, and it will continue. It will continue to scroll. I want to get down to the next line, so I'll put in a return. A return on this screen will not translate into a hard return when you play the macro back. If you want that, you have to do a control V first, and we do some other exercises that experiment with this control V feature. So just to format what you're looking at in the macro editor, you can press return all you want to come down to the next line. Okay, you have your macro created. Press exit. And play back your macro. Alt F10, and this one was called hotel, right? Or hotels.
Plural, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, but what's it say? It just says buyer is purchasing blank hotels at blank dollars each.
Yes.
That's because why?
Okay. Why?
You have two variables.
We haven't. Well.
What are your two variables right now?
Quantity
And price.
Quantity and price. And remember, there are two parts to a variable. Quantity and price is what part?
the name.
The name.
The name.
What's the other part?
The value.
The value, the contents. There is nothing in these.
Oh.
All right? Now, you already know one way of putting values in with the control page up at your editing screen. But that's kind of a pain, right? You're not going to want to go through that whole process every time. I want you to be able to play back the macro, and the macro asks you, tell me what quantity, tell me what price. Let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to do a home, control F10, hotel. Yeah. Mine was called hotels also. Home, control F10, hotels. Didn't I call it hotels?
I thought so.
Well, I'm going to have to do it on a blank one here. There it is. All right. There's a special command. Notice on this list, there are lots and lots of commands. So you're just going to use one more, and it's called text. And notice how it says text command, a variable, and a message. This message will appear on the screen asking you for the contents to put into this variable. So, choose text, and what's the first variable that I want to put something into? Let's say quantity. And then what? Till. And then the message that I want to appear. So I would just type enter the quantity. And I always like a question to either end with a question mark or a colon. I like colon and a space. Then to tell it I'm done with the message, I need another tilde. And then I need the same thing again. Control page up, text for the price, tilde. And then the message, enter the price. Colon, space, another tilde, exit out. Now when I play the macro,
hotel.
It asks, enter the quantity. I'm selling 3 hotels. Enter the price at 500,000. And it says buyer is purchasing 3 for the price of 500,000. Your turn. And it's all written out in your notes. Right down here. Text, quantity, enter the quantity. So,
She says.
how are you going to get into the macro? Home,
Oh, boy.
Control F10, and hotels. And you skip the description. You don't want to change that. And now you're into the macro.
The text goes above the.
Right, you're going to need to press return a couple times to open up the space to put in the text commands.
What do we want? Enter the quantity.
First comes the variable name. Clear that and put your macro back again. And Alt F10. All right, she's selling more expensive hotels than you are. You are. Did you see the purpose why I put a colon and space after the... Because when the message comes up, it leaves your cursor at the end of all the characters that you included, and you don't want it butting right up against. Okay, that's it for this 20 minutes, although I have a couple review questions for you here. But can you see the value of what putting variables in macros can do, especially when it asks you the question? We have a macro here that I know some of you use all the time that asks for what kind of letter do you want to write. It just pulls up this list of letters, you choose which one, you say what the company is and what the letter is about, and it writes the letter for you. So the power of variables combined with macros and merge can completely automate your whole office. So, what are these other questions here? What do you think? What did I stress a lot? If your macro with variables is not working, what should you go in and look for first?
The tilde.
The tildes. I've had, just leaving out one of those tildes can even hang up the computer, let alone not have the macro work right. And true or false, variables are only available in macros. What else are they available in? Merge. WordPerfect 5.1, the whole merge in macros has actually become a programming language. Merge and macro programming language. And what limitation is there for the variable names? 7 letters. 7 letters. You can name more, but it's only going to read 7, so. And what command did you use? What macro programming command is the one that gives you the message prompting you for the contents of the variables? Text. Text. That was the command that you put into the macro that got the question. Okay, we hope you would certainly continue on and learn a lot more. And that's the end of this video. Bye.
That was cute. I like that.
Yeah. So how many minutes is that?
I think that was just